Good morning and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Special Council Budget Meeting on January 23rd, 2024. We welcome everyone attending in person or watching via our YouTube channel. Today's proceedings will include a morning session, a break for lunch, and an afternoon session, and we'll be focusing on the operating budgets today. So I'll start with a roll call of council. I, Mayor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
And Councillor Schwint. Thank you. The land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for time immemorial, and we recognize the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Nope, seeing none. Today we're here to wrestle with a budget, which is always a fun and challenging time. And as we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are in a very challenging time right now. We're in a period of rapid growth in the township, and we have an opportunity here to set ourselves up to prepare for that growth. We need to understand that we've been fiscally responsible and as a result have had the lowest tax rate in the region for many years. And I also want to point out that we collect taxes for the region and the school board. So, and this is more for people watching. I know council is fully aware of this, but of your property taxes, only 26 cents of the dollar comes to us. So that's challenging for us as well, because we're cognizant of people's budgetary needs, but we also have some budgetary needs here too. So as we move to a municipality that will have two larger urban centers and as well as extensive agricultural land, we want to have a vision for the future while protecting those rural and agricultural lands. So we've made climate action commitments that are challenging and commitments to our residents to be considerate of their needs. It's a period of a high inflation, and so there are just so many competing priorities that I know we'll have some interesting discussions today as we wrestle with where the township is going, how we position ourselves for the future, and how we are true to our constituents. So I expect we'll listen to staff and to each other, and as we always do, have respectful and very full debates and conversations. And I will turn the floor to David.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you to council. Certainly, I'd like to echo where the mayor started in terms of her comments around challenging. These continue to be very challenging times, not just for the township of Woolwich, but municipalities in general. Certainly, I want to reflect as we start this that I'm certainly glad 2023 is behind us. It was probably the most challenging time I've ever seen in my whole career. A lot of that, frankly, had to deal with a lot of the provincial decisions and changes that came down the pipe, only to be reversed and rolled back. And that actually, unfortunately, took not just the township of Woolwich, but the three cities, the other townships, the region itself, away from some of our core service delivery and program delivery. It took us away from what I always commonly and affectionately refer to as our community building work, right? There could be so much more time and effort put into building community, the services and programs that we need. So as we start 2024, it is my fond hope that we'll have a little bit more stability in terms of decision-making and the like coming out of Queen's Park, so that we can, in fact, focus 2024 on beyond on such things as implementing a new strategic plan, developing a focus for the future for the Township of Woolwich, where we want to establish our community priorities and focus. And that's the core work that I think we as public servants signed up for, and I'm sure you as council did in terms of getting elected, to fundamentally make a difference for the community and the residents and businesses that we serve. But one thing I think is fitting to talk about before we start into budget is the fact that there's been a lot of discussions lately in various circles coming out of various municipalities, in even the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus, about the fact that when is it going to finally be time for us to be able to sit down with the province and review the antiquated municipal property assessment, municipal revenue, municipal finance system. It's very difficult to continue to deliver the core services and programs that our residents and businesses continue to expect when ultimately we're dealing with very few assessment tools and revenue tools, and they're very outdated. They're very antiquated, as I've noted. So I, for one, am going to be interested in the debates and discussion we will have on those types of or that issue here, and what sort of advocacy will happen across Ontario, again with AMO's help, to be able to once and for all engage in a discussion, not unlike I've mentioned before, AMO did a number of years ago with a report with respect to a share of the sales tax. There may be other solutions, but that certainly was one that was very interesting that was developed. I think what will be interesting as we go through this budget process, and certainly what I look forward to is developing the new strategic plan is, certainly as the mayor has noted, we continue to be challenged on some of our core areas in terms of managing properly our growth and development, including economic prosperity, economic development. We continue to be challenged with respect to managing our infrastructure services, our maintenance, our capital programs, keeping up and staying top of that, as well as building healthy communities, safe, active communities with quality facilities, quality programs, et cetera. More so than ever in our time, there are so many competing interests for 26 cents of every tax dollar that we take in. There's high expectations. And I think, I spoke to this a little bit last year. I want to reiterate that the other thing that's different now in the municipal sector is it's not just the traditional services around planning, building, infrastructure, parks, rec, and cemeteries. It's the fact that the public also expects us to not just refer affordable housing solutions to the region like we would have done in the past. They want to know what we're going to do about that. As well, in the past, sustainability and climate action, was not as high a heightened focus as it is like never before today. And there's expectations from the public and businesses and others with respect to, what are we going to achieve? On top of that, the pandemic also exposed, real societal type issues around truth and reconciliation, the whole broader spectrum of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what has become even more challenging is not just where do we find the dollars, but how do we continue to provide the traditional services and yet still provide these other service expectations when, the expectation seems to be we have to continually do it off the side of people's desks. Oh, we're just going to fit this into the program somewhere. That doesn't mean that we're going to be able to do things the same, with the same level of expectation, I think, that's ultimately expected in terms of delivering quality services and programs in these areas. You can only do so much when you're doing work off the side of desks. One of the things I want to acknowledge is that, as council would have known, less in the public, certainly our director of finance was off for a month and a half. Thankfully, Stephen Fairweather, our interim director of finance, we were able to bring him on board quickly. But still, December was a challenging time in terms of finishing off the budget. And I just wanted to note, you probably saw this yourself, but the target we were hitting was 8.5. We believed we hit the 8.5, but in January, when we were doing some fine tuning, it's actually at 8.7. So if you didn't see that, that's something that we are going to have to still deal with council on and wrestle with. We've got some ideas around that. But we appreciate your patience and understanding as we navigated as best we could without Richard helping us navigate at the helm. Just the nuance of really being short-staffed in the finance department. As you would have seen, in your budget package, you have the full level of detail. As we did last year and as we've done traditionally for quite a number of years, all of senior management is going to present at a high level in terms of focusing in on where the major shifts and changes are. We think that's the most efficient and effective use of council's time. A number of years ago, as a result of a debriefing with a previous council following budget process, we started also developing notes, which you would have seen in the columns with the budgets. That's to anticipate, hopefully, that we've captured any questions ahead of time that council may have about overages, underage, whatever the situation. I think I might have just created a new word there. Certainly, however, that doesn't mean that questions regarding specifics that you may have seen that we didn't have a note with, or that any of us may not cover off in our overall presentations. But again, this is meant to achieve a balance between, a balance between line by line and making sure that we focus in on the core increases, decreases, core shifts in terms of focus and areas of service, and ultimately be as efficient and effective as giving you a high level and good overview of the fiscal position that we find ourselves in, the challenges that we're faced. And then ultimately, I think, council in their wisdom said, hey, why don't we do 2 of these day-long budget meetings to really plow through and get that good sense. And then right after that, we can get into the hearty debate and discussion. As we move through the process, though, what will always be beneficial for staff is if there are, and especially since we're still in this transition period in terms of Richard coming back into the workplace, we may not be able to be spot on with instant reactions during the meeting as maybe last year was. If there are things that we can't answer, we'll come back with at the next meeting. Or if there are things that you really want some more information on, it'll be important to communicate today or in the intervening time period between meetings, just in the spirit of good communication, so we can properly react and respond to council with respect to any questions or concerns. So with that, I'll turn the mic back to Mayor Shantz, and certainly look forward, as always, to working through a very difficult and challenging budget. But nevertheless, as the mayor said, I think the key thing is we'll work through it with a great level of professionalism and respect, answer your questions to the quality that we need to, and we'll navigate through this process as best as humanly possible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Before I turn the floor over to Stephen, I want to say thank you first of all to Stephen for stepping in at the last minute and helping us through this. This is always a challenging time, but to the rest of staff, especially for stepping up as you always do and working through the budget. I know you start early and spend a lot of time. What we don't see is sort of the horse trading that goes on behind the scenes, and the reductions that you make in your own minds when you look at your program and what you need, and then bring it down. So I hope that you can help us to see that through the process of the next 2 days, that where you've looked at what you think we need and what we need to do, and how you maybe have already made some changes and brought those down. And so I think that'll be a really healthy part of our discussion today as we figure out where we're going. So thank you to staff, to all of you here, and to your teams for all the work that you've done leading up to this. And with that, I will turn the floor over to our Interim Director of Finance, Stephen Fairweather.
There we go. Sorry. I'd like to thank council for the opportunity to present the 2024 operating and capital budget for the township. David's provided you with an overview of sort of how staff have spent time getting to the point we're at today. And I will start into the presentation for you as to where we're at and how we've got to where we're going. Something's not working right here. Here. So what I wanted to do for council is, it's already been highlighted as to the split of the tax rates for the various school boards, region, and the township. Before you hear is, for every dollar that's been paid in 2023, 59% or 59 cents was collected on behalf of the region. 15% or 15 cents of every dollar was collected on behalf of the school board, and 26 cents was collected, or 26%, on behalf of the township. Some of the in the development of the draft budget, we had certain budget pressures. One of them is the high inflation environment. As of December, inflation is still at 3.4%. We still are experiencing continued supply chain issues in sourcing and securing the goods and services that the township provides and has to acquire the items for. We have growth pressures highlighted by service expectations. As the city's growing and people are moving into the city, the township, my apologies. The residents are looking for expanded service levels and expectations. We have reduction in provincial grant funding. The OMPF grant is decreasing by $41,600 and the OCIF by $16,000. The development of the draft budget before you, as David has highlighted, has a proposed tax rate increase of 8.7%. Within that budget, there's an increase in the infrastructure levy of 1.5%, or $215,000. The climate action greening levy, we've increased that by 1%, the contribution. So it's an increase of $143,000. And the township has experienced a new assessment growth of 3.09%, or $442,000. The highlights of the draft operating budget for capital and operating is the total operating expenditures are $25.7 million, and that covers all the core services that the township provides. The total capital expenditures are approximately 36.6, and those are predominantly in the road, bridge, reconstruction, facility improvements, information technology. So the expenditures are there mainly to sustain the existing infrastructure. The total levy requirements for capital and operating this year are just a little over $16 million. And of that, the operating budget is approximately $14.8 million, and capital about $1.2 million. Within the draft budget this year, there's a request for 5 new positions. You'll hear more details of each of these positions within each of the departmental presentations. And we have a development engineering technologist which is for the coordination of managed servicing infrastructure needs within the township. We have the fire training officer. Was presented to council in 2023, and it was deferred to be represented again in 2024. And it's dealing with the impact of the OREG 34322 for mandatory certification. We have the Climate Action and Sustainability Coordinator, and we're recommending that that gets funded through the Climate Action Green Infrastructure Reserve Fund. And that position will continue on with the implementation of the strategic plan from the council. We have the Manager of Bylaw Enforcement Services, and this position is required to accommodate growth and legislative changes. And we have a Revenue Clerk, which is due to growth. We need to add a position in there, and that position is a third funded from taxes, water, and wastewater. Within the budget, there's internal and external debenture requirements in 2024. 1.9 million is likely we'll look to internal borrow that, and that's a township's portion of the Breslau Drain Number 1 project. We have about 9.6 million in external borrowing within the budget, and it's for the Peel Street Pedestrian Bridge Hot Mix Resurfacing Program and other capital works and the North Sanitary Pumping Station. These borrowings will impact the 2025 budget as there's no financing put in for the servicing of the debt. And the general operating will pick up the Breslau Drain Number 1 and capital bridge works. Wastewater operating budget will be impacted by the North Sanitary Sewer Pumping Station. And just for council, the timing of the issuance of debentures is tied to substantial completion of the capital works that they're identified for. So those may happen in 25 or may happen in 26. But when they do happen, we have to build the funding requirements within the budget for those years. So where the ask is there in 24, but the issuance of the debt may not happen until 25 or 26. The repayment will be above. So the ask within the capital budget will exceed the debt per capita established by council. With the indexing on that, it's $319. And to service the ask of just a little over 11.5 million would require a debt per capita of $372. So the highlights of the draft budget is it's resulting in an increase. So the 8.7% results in an overall tax rate increase for an average home of $418 of $93.05 annually. For each $100,000 of residential assessment, the township generates about $255.83, and that's shared amongst school boards, the township, and the region. A 1% tax rate increase on the township share results in $10.69 for the average house at $418,000. The highlights of the draft budget is based on our look at what has come out as the suggested tax rate increases for the other townships and the cities. We would still be the lowest tax rate in the region. A 1% increase in tax generates about $143,000 in additional funding to service the programs and projects. And then before you is just the draft calendar of how the budget's being presented to council. So we're here on today doing the kickoff of the presentations for the operating. Tomorrow we continue on with the capital presentations and then get into questions and budget deliberations, hopefully tomorrow afternoon or Thursday afternoon on that. So with that, I'll turn that back over to the chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fairweather. And council, do you have questions to start, or should we jump right in? Okay. Thank you. I think we're ready to jump right in, and I'll turn the floor over to Director of Infrastructure Services, Jared Poupé.
Good morning, Mayor Shantz and members of council. This is different for us, so I appreciate the day-long budget cycle. So Carter McGuire from Manager of Operations, myself, Director of Infrastructure Services, are here to present to you the operating budget for 2024. Just to start off, that our infrastructure services is comprised of the asset management group. We are responsible for asset management for the entire municipality. Obviously, all the departments feed into this. This is an incredibly important piece, and it's incredibly important from a whole lot of places. It's important to understand life cycles of the infrastructure that we own and operate it. It is legislated under OREG 588-17. And it is certainly tied to grant and funding, and appropriately so. I think that upper governments are saying that municipalities need to understand what they own, understand the life cycle, and how to apply the most cost-effective rehabilitation replacement processes to ensure that we extend the life cycle of our assets. Council will receive the asset management report on the Township of Woolwich for all of our assets, not just core. Core assets were required in 2022, just about $1 billion worth of core assets. That would include water, wastewater, roads, bridges, and storm. Now we will look at everything that the Township owns as legislated by the province. And then in 2025, we will dive into the levels of service. I think that would involve public engagement, and we're looking forward to that process. And again, I think it's incredibly important for all of us to buy into that, as it is the best way to manage your assets. We also look after the engineering department, both capital and operating. It's a lot of road reconstruction projects, our hot mix paving program, capital bridge paving program, and the myriad of other things that come up, drains, and all things engineering, we'll say. Save and except for development, that is with development services. They look after that growth component, but certainly we are at the table for those discussions as development typically pays for the initial installation, and then we are there to look after that infrastructure forever until replacement happens. Today, we are primarily focused on operations, also known as public works. It involves roads, water and wastewater. Water and wastewater is a rate-based budget that will be presented to council at a later date. So right now we are looking at the levy-supported operations draft budget. As mentioned in the past, as council is well aware, we are fairly heavily legislated. OREG 23902 is the minimum maintenance standard. OREG 588-17 is the asset management legislation. And then, of course, we're all under the Municipal Act umbrella. Want to make it clear to council that while not contained wholly in this budget before you, staff will be presenting to council at a later date, likely in Q3 of 2024, for a position in operations, looking at an operations technician that can help support our two supervisors and our manager of operations for all of the work that we look after. That would involve a lot of winter patrol, involve contracted service support, and a host of other things that we look after. But there will be a fulsome report being brought forward to council at a later date. But I did want to highlight that here at this budget cycle. We are, unfortunately, as we grow, we are struggling. I think that Mr. Fairweather laid out very well, and I hope that spoke through the package that was presented to council, the challenges that we are facing as we are an ever-growing and fast-growing municipality in the region of Waterloo. We're very attractive. We provide an incredible customer service to our residents, and we struggle often with both resourcing on the personnel side as well as the funding side, and it's reflected in our operating budget. With our growth, you would see that in our operating side, we're talking about a 6% base increase, and that's generally reflected in the operating from 2023 to 2024. But there unfortunately is reductions to surface treatment program. Last year, we weren't able to do any surface treatment. We had about $130,000 allocated. That wasn't enough to perform a program. And so we had asked council to transfer that over, and then you see that in the budget. That would be an increase in the hardtop line this year. So there's over $300,000 there. we should be funding in around that allocation. It's important as well, and we can see growth in practical terms in the traffic counts that we're seeing on both gravel roads, on surface treated roads. And what that indicates then is obviously likely congestion in other areas. People are finding other ways, and we have more people coming to the township. So when we start to see increases in traffic, gravel roads are only able to sustain certain levels. They should be then looked at to convert to a surface treated road. Surface treated roads that are seeing high volumes of traffic then should be looked to convert to hot mix roadways. So we are seeing that. That is happening. And I think council could appreciate the number of complaints and inquiries at times we get from those on our gravel road networks. They are challenging roads. Some of those roads do probably need to be reconstructed. And right now we are only funding for resurfacing. So again, there is a deficiency in funds available for some of that work program. We also are looking to try to continue on, albeit at a bit of a snail's pace with our stormwater management. We continue to try to open up those ponds to ensure that they are providing the service that they were intended to, which is respect to flood mitigation, quality control, discharge. But they have been choked up over time with our lack of attention with some of the vegetation that does crop up there. So we are moving that. We have not yet moved into any consulting services to help in stormwater management side of things. But again, allowing our staff to go in there first, helping out with or using some contracted services for dealing with some of the difficult trees to remove as well. And that comes with its challenges as well in some of the communities as we haven't been there. So I can appreciate some of the residents are concerned, and we try to communicate as best we can. And obviously that takes some time. So that's, still an important part of what we are looking to do. And I think that's important to get a handle on some of that downstream infrastructure as development starts to occur, and will be discharging additional water. Case in point would be in Elmira. We know that the Activa lands will be developing there over by Barnswallow. And of course, there's a lot of downstream infrastructure that it will use the Weigel drain and the South drain in some instances. So we need to ensure that those downstream pieces of infrastructure are ready to support the development that comes. And again, we look at development as a good thing. We want good development. Development is not a bad thing from our vantage point. It's just important that we ensure that we demand good development. We make sure that infrastructure is installed properly so that we can manage it and it can meet its useful life. That's really the intent of that. And we have a growing and thriving community, and that is not lost on us. And we also have people who've been here for a long, long time, and we owe them a service as well. So that's the intent of operations, really, is just to keep the wheels running and fly under the radar as much as possible. And most people won't know, as long as the toilets are flushing and you can drive where you need to go. I think that's the important part here for us. Equipment is a huge concern for the organization, and I think that is not just here in the region of Waterloo. I think everybody's seeing that. You will hear later about fire vehicles. We are not immune to that. Rec and community services, as well as infrastructure services, have seen significant increases in equipment. And we have looked to try to address that, again, incrementally. We're not able to address the whole problem, but we are looking to put more into the reserve funds for that. So I think from a high level, just wanted to hit those points. Again, Mr. McGuire, Manager of Operations, and myself would be here if council would like to talk about any specifics. We're more than happy to do so.
Okay. Council, any questions? Councillor Schwinn, and then Councillor Burgess.
I know the asset management section has been a big priority for the last couple of 3 years. Do you see once we get past, say, next year or this year even, we'll be in a maintenance type mode and there'll be less active work required and be kind of easier on our budget? Or is this going to be an ongoing high level project for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, through Mayor Shawns to Councillor Schwinn. So asset management is something that we need to live and breathe in our day-to-day work lives. And that's something that hasn't happened. So that's a transition for the organization. So it will always be front and center. It should be actually the only way we capital plan or look to operate. That's really what it should be. So we're working towards that. However, to your question regarding the outlay of cash in respect to consulting services, we're hopeful that that will diminish. So what we envision is that the more internal staff are able to educate ourselves, apply that day in and day out, that you will see less need for outside help in that world. Right now, it is quite a large undertaking. It's incredible undertaking, actually, when you get right into it. So we are, I would say, on the surface, and we will have a good plan before council mid-year this year that will be presented by our consultant who council had supported. And going forward, we will need some additional help to do public engagement on levels of service. And then what we're looking to do is all the individual asset pieces that the departments then start to focus more in on that. I mean, the intent is who cares more, but those who work with it and deal with it day in and day out. So I would say that would be township staff. So the goal ultimately would be to have asset management done solely internally, but we are working towards that. It's not going to happen overnight. So I think a long-winded way of saying, overall, we are looking to get out of relying on consultant reporting and more have staff reporting forward to council in the asset management world.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the director. Just getting into a few of the numbers here, if I can. On the first page there, engineering administration in 2023, it was about 300,000 over budget. And if I go into the fine print there a bit on page 151, a lot of that looks like it came from a new line item of equipment allocation. Can you just expand on that and why that's unique for that year not being carried forward?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess. That is reflective of the cost increases on fleet in general. That's really what that is trying to rectify that. And I would, if I am out of line here, please feel free, Mr. Fairweather. But that is my understanding is that we were trying to right the ship in the fleet world, in our rolling stock world, right there.
Thank you, Glenn. Again, you touched on the hardtop maintenance, why that one's significantly higher this year. Last year we were 300 under budget, now we're 300 over for projections. A lot of that's through external contracts. Is there, like, we're talking over $500,000 there. Is there any way we can bring any of that in-house, or kind of what's used there and where can that go in the future to bring some of that home?
Evan, can you tell us what page you're on?
So the
Just so we can
hardtop maintenance
follow.
was page 1. So it went from 600,000 in 23 with a budget total of 300. And then the 2024 budget is 935,000. And then the external contracts is page 158. Sorry, I may be saying that too quick, but.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Burgess. Regarding external contracts, that's a challenging one for those particular items. You can see that the street sweeping, we don't rely any longer on contracted services. We take care of street sweeping on our own. Crack sealing is something that we have, I don't see us really, certainly in the short term, ever looking to explore on our own. Surface treat, again, there's probably about 3 or 4 contractors that do this in Ontario. So again, it's something that likely we're not going to undertake on our own. The maintenance paving one is again, we're not real pavers, so we do pothole repair. We have a hot box that we have, that's certainly helped that, because we used to outsource that. We used to use a lot of cold patch. Now we're able to put hot mix in. So that's an evolution and a good one, I would say. As far as pavement markings, unfortunate one about that too is there's really only so many players that do that. And again, throughout Ontario, we do have the region to fall back on. They have that service as well if need be. And that cost has gone up. I think every municipality is facing that cost. Obviously, we're water-based now. So that's been a big change. There used to be oil, it stayed longer. Water doesn't stay as long. So you're having to paint annually for sure, just from an environmental perspective too. Then as far as the road needs study, this is one that we are looking to take on our own, but we are needing still some support in that realm. So we have started to do some of the inspections and started to limit the need for external services. But that's an evolution as well, much like asset management planning. We would look to see to get out of that, hopefully within the next 5 years, that we would be completely sufficient to complete all of the work that we need to do and do the modeling that we need to do to assess our road network.
So looking at debenturing for equipment, hiring staff, that's to do some of that work's just not feasible.
I guess, there's probably a lot there. I think that larger municipalities start to take on some of this work, just because of that growth aspect, and you're able to do that. I wouldn't say we're there despite our fast, growing nature. Yeah, it's also specialized in a lot of areas as well. So it's something that, that we likely wouldn't, be getting into. We need to focus more on some road building activities. I would suggest one of the focuses for us, in the near to longer term would be for us to convert more gravel roads to surface treated roads, and having some of our internal staff start to prep some of those roads. I think that would be a better use of resourcing, instead of relying solely on contractors to prepare the roads. You would always, look to have a surface treat contractor to apply that to it, but I think our roads operators, staff ultimately to prep roads would be great. We have graders, we could put in culverts and do ditching and so forth like that. But right now, we're not at the position. We still do need contracted service, but I would think there would be some value, to moving that internal.
Okay, just two more questions, quick general ones. Although it doesn't look like it out there right now, we had a slow start to winter, I think. December was pretty lacking snow. How's the budget going on there? We got a few numbers, but are we looking pretty good? Maybe that's a question for Carter. On par.
Through you, Mayor Johns. As far as winter control, as of the beginning of November, we were online for control. As far as the actuals, we still don't have the final numbers through December, so I can't, I'd have to look into that to figure out where we sat by the end of the year. But for sure, that delay in winter did help us with our overall budget, since we budget the first 3 months of the year and then the final month of the year for our winter control. So that would help us for sure.
Thanks. And lastly, just to ask this question again, how goes things on Sawmill, Tillman, and Scotch Line with the region, trying to get rebates on those ones for the maintenance, because of the detour? Sawmill Road, Scotch Line, and yeah, well, all the detour traffic when the bridge was out, we were
Yeah.
looking at getting the rebates.
Sorry, through Mayor Shunts to Councilor Burr, in regards to, like maintenance, additional maintenance required on the gravels?
Yeah, we were looking at rebating some or getting it back from the region.
Correct, yeah. So I do believe that there was definitely some invoices sent there. We have been working with the region on a number of those issues too. So I think as far as I'm concerned, things have been moving in the right direction. And yeah, so I don't have anything other to report on than that.
Thank you.
So can we get a report or some kind of an indication of how much we got rebated on? Or how they supported us in that? Because I know there was a lot of traffic on the gravel roads, not just Sawmill, but I think Halm, did you talk about?
Tillman and Scotch Line, I think, are the other.
Yeah, but there's a couple of
Reedwood,
Breslau.
yeah.
Yeah, by Reedwoods, and then, but also out Breslau Way too, because of the sawmill closure. There was a lot of back road travel.
Yeah, and to Mayor Shunts and through to council. So I think there's a few pieces to this. Yes, in short, I think we can certainly provide council with information in how that relationship works. It has raised some other debates and discussions between the township and the region as far as how work proceeds and expectations. I think that what we are looking to move towards is something not unlike what the cities have in their area maintenance agreements with the region. So no township has an agreement with the region. I think that's something that, as not just through detour traffic, through other works in and around regional roads, infrastructure that they construct that we may have to maintain. Sidewalks is a good case in point. So I think there's going to be a lot of movement, and I'd suggest for the better, so that we can really formalize. There's been a lot of things that have been done in the past in various jurisdictions, and I think we're really looking to formalize exactly like how the cities happen. So what I would like to suggest is some updates on those discussions. I think those are most important because they cover many more things than just detour traffic. I mean, one could argue that you know, having the regional road and under construction is just the natural cause, much like we do a reconstruction. I would take Industrial Drive as a difficult reconstruction because of the businesses there. So, you know, we face some of those challenges too. You have some service disruptions there. We try to do the best we can, but now I'm quite happy to drive by Industrial Drive, and you know, some of those tough conversations are in the past. It's a wonderful looking corridor and a roadway that's well used, a wonderful wide sidewalk that is well used too. So I think they're overall it's a support too. So, you know, I think that that's kind of how the discussions are. So yes, we have invoiced. Yes, we have received payment. But we have, those are sort of informal type of agreements that we're working through just to make sure we're as whole as possible. But I think really moving towards a formalized agreement. So I think if council's okay with that idea, I would like to report back on sort of that process and that progress on more formalizing maintenance in general with the region and the area townships.
Would that be something we can, excuse me, put on the outstanding activity list? I'll turn to Jeff on that. And are you looking in the first half of this year that, like, will we be in a position, do you think, to have some kind of a report then, or does it need to wait till third quarter?
Yeah, I think we would have an update come the third quarter. I think it's going to take some time. We have started that process and those discussions have begun. But I think if we could have progress updates, that would be helpful. So, but I would be looking later in the year. Okay.
If you could put that on the outstanding activity list so we don't lose track of it. Councillor Bryant, and thank you for using your hand, because sometimes if you just wave your hand, I may not see it. So great.
Thank you. Just a question, and I'll give you the names of the roads in Breslau as well. It was Hopewell Creek, Spitzig. They were also using Forester and Village View as detours to cut around with all the construction. But my question is, do we have projects that haven't been completed from 2023 and ones that possibly didn't get done? I know there was a lot of issues with companies having staff not able to do the jobs or insufficient staff. So I don't know if all of our projects have been completed and paid for, or what's happening with some of these. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, through you, Councillor Bryant, or through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Bryant. I would say from the operating perspective, there's always more work than we have resources for, so you never get your program done. But I wouldn't say that there was anything that comes to mind that we were not able to accomplish in the operations world. I think maybe a different discussion on Thursday. We can talk a little bit more about individual capital programs or projects may have been affected at times. Sometimes that, you know, depending on what plans the region has, it may turn into a bit of a deferral for us on some of the capital program. But from an operations perspective, I think we've been able to touch our work plan and for the most part get as much as done as possible.
So we haven't deferred or pushed anything back at this point then that was in the budget from last year?
Right, not in operations. It was surface treat. We were unable to fund a program that because there wasn't enough money in that budget line. So we asked to carry that forward. So we're hoping to execute on a surface treat program this year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Director Poupey. Excuse me, speaking of that surface street, I was hoping that you could just elaborate on that a bit. I think that you did a pretty good job of explaining that the $130,000 that we initially had budgeted in 2023 just really wasn't sufficient in order to run that program. Looking at, and I'm on page 159, 160 here in the budget package. You know, if we look at, I'll go down to 160 because I think it's just easier to look at the surface treatment. 2021, it's more than $500,000 at 555. The next year actual is 333, and then we budgeted 130. Can you provide some insight as to why we budgeted so low of a value last year? Because it meant that we couldn't spend it by the sounds of things. And then is 380 what we should be budgeting for therein and abouts moving forward? Because I know that a portion of that is a carryover from last year. I'm just trying to look forward to 2025. What should we be budgeting here so that we can spend it and we can keep the roads in the state that they need to be in?
Through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Cadeau. So what you're seeing there was a bit of a transition from us. We were looking to do some conversions from gravel to surface treat. We had selected the southeast quadrant of the township, which was Breslau area, as there was less horse and buggy traffic. Was really and there wasn't that many roads. So what you're seeing here is before we capitalized that work, we were sort of doing that out of operation. So that's why you're seeing some pretty significant dollars in 2021 with the $500,000 or so. We've since transitioned the conversion road program to capital, rightfully so, and that the operating side of things would then look after the resurfacing that's ongoing from that. But the initial conversion should be capitalized and come out of the capital budget. So that's part of why you're seeing the big number a little lower the next year. And quite simply, we were in a tough budget year last year. We're in a tougher budget year, I would suggest, this year. And that was one of the cuts that we had to make to meet the baseline. So that's really what you're seeing. So I guess in moving forward and forward thinking, there needs to be vision and investment for us to really do what we need to do in our road system. And what I mean by that is I think all of our area municipal partners have tried to reduce their gravel road network by surface treating. It's an incredibly cost-effective use. And the township unfortunately has a large number of roads. Almost half the road network is in gravel. And we should be investing to reduce the gravel road network to surface treat those roads. So really, that should be out of the capital. We should see a big injection, but then naturally the operating side should go up year over year because we need to then be ensuring that we are looking after those roads as well. Typically, a surface treat road is on a 7-year cycle. A gravel road should be on a 3-year cycle, and I think our area municipalities are much closer to that 3-year cycle than we are. We were at about an 11.5-year cycle until recently. We were at a 7-year cycle. Now we're sort of getting a little north of 7 years again. So that's why I think we're seeing a lot of complaints. We're having a lot of gravel roads that probably do need to be revisited and looked at and likely converted. So I think that's some of the challenges we're seeing right now here. It's not simply just resurfacing. I think we're looking into rebuilding and converting. So a bit of a long story way of saying that, yes, there does need to be more injection into that area.
Councillor Grant, you're the only one who hasn't spoken yet. Before I go back to Councillor Schwint, do you want to jump in or do you want to wait? Or okay, Councillor Schwint.
This roads conversation's got me intrigued. Do we benchmark our costs per kilometer or cost per usage on our different roads compared to other municipalities so we can get a sense? Is it worth investing more in capital upkeep or maintenance? Be question one. And question two might be for Director of Finance. But when we look at DC charges, do they take into account the costs on existing infrastructure because of more usage?
To you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Schwint. So I could probably attempt both questions. We do not benchmark other area municipalities. We have at times looked to try to do some joint tenders with area municipalities. So that has been cost effective. Sometimes it depends on the program. I think there are other programs where it would cost us more to partner just geographically, that sort of thing too. So no, but it's certainly something we can look at. We definitely know what our costs are in Woolwich. And again, certain municipalities do things different. I can tell you that there's some area municipalities here that do a really good job of road building. So they take away a lot of that contracted cost, do it internal, and then they just have that surface treat contractor. So that would, show differently per kilometer than say us, where we're contracting the road building plus the surface treated component. So I think that was what I had alluded to earlier, is that something we probably need to look to do a better job of and train our staff to be able to do that. I think that would help in the long term. But certainly something we could track and find out sort of what the cost is. I know North Dumfries and Pushlands that way, they get incredibly cheap asphalt. I mean, it's just, the pits are there. 401s there. There's lots of reasons for that. We can't come close to some of the per ton costs that they get for asphalt. And that's just historical. It's always been that way. Even in these cost inflationary times, they still get a better rate. So there's just some things we won't be able to compete on at the same level as some of our other area municipal partners. In regards to the DC, and Stephen can certainly help out if I'm offline. There always has to be an assessment. So what is growth related versus what is existing benefit? Those are the two pieces you have to look at. So for example, a good case in point would be if we had a gravel road and we wanted to convert that to surface street, you could look at capacity, meaning does that road need to be wider? Do we need to support multimodal? Probably not on a surface street road, you wouldn't do that. But where you can start to leverage development charges is to say, hey, why are we doing that conversion? Well, because the traffic's increasing. Why is traffic increasing? Probably because we got congestion in other areas and people are finding other routes. So yes, there would be a DC eligible component on situations where it's either a capacity or increased traffic or increased even pavement thickness, for example, because we need to support more truck traffic. So there absolutely is a DC component that can be applied to the road network. And we're currently going under a DC background study right now. And that's exactly what we're assessing.
Anything to add? No, okay. David?
And thanks through you, Mayor Shantz. Just want to add some additional comment and context on a couple of things we've discussed so far with infrastructure services. Further to Councillor Schwint's questions around asset management and Mr. Poupet's response regarding what we can do in-house and what we can do with consultants. One of the things I wanted to emphasize for council is we're still trying to meet some government deadlines that will be very important to meet because we've shown that if there's one area that the government's got serious about in terms of penalizing us if we don't meet certain deadlines, it's how they impact and draw back funding if we don't stay on top of the asset management program. I also use it as an opportunity to say quite a number of years ago, I'll date myself here, but Premier Wynne and Minister Del Duca were in town and we met at the region, the 3 cities, the 4 townships in the region. And one of the things we've long been advocating for from an asset management is if we have our asset management house in order, then can we start to move away from application-based infrastructure funding, like those types of applications, because they're onerous, they're competitive, and could we not move more towards what we've traditionally done in the gas tax era, where everybody gets an allocation, again, provided you've got your asset management house in order. And further to what Mr. Poupet said, definitely in the future, I can see both the federal and provincial governments saying, we're not going to give you this level of funding unless your asset management house is in order, unless we can clearly see that you're articulating where your priority investment is, what needs to be accomplished, so that we can back up, whether they stick with an application-based system or move to an allocation-based system. So I wanted to mention that. Further to a question from Councillor Burgess around in-house versus contracted resources. One of the things I wanted to mention is what we've always done over the years with many different directors and operations managers is also evaluate where is the most efficient use of tax dollars as well. And you may have seen that even in other areas as we've evaluated, for example, in building, do we contract with a consulting firm or do we, what's more efficient and cost effective or bring on resources? So I want to assure you that one of the things we'll always be doing before we evaluate whether it makes sense to bring on more staff to do more in-house is to evaluate what's the most efficient and effective use of tax dollars because we always need to do that. The last thing that I just wanted to pick up on is further to Councillor Cadeau's comments around, the changing dollars in terms of surface treatment. I think it's a great opportunity to mention that, that whole discussion is a prime example of hopefully what will discussed throughout this budget process is Interim Director Fairweather mentioned that, all things being considered, if we figure out where various cities, townships will land at the conclusion of their budget process, we'll still have the lowest tax rate in the region. The reality of that, though, and I think Mr. Poupet touched upon this, is to keep there and to keep low. What that means is we don't necessarily have as much in the way of tax levy that we need to stay on top of conversion programs, to stay on top of our paving programs, to stay on top of gravel resurfacing. And I think it's as good a time as any to mention that, it's interesting that yes, we are growing. You see the assessment growth that we come in, but let's be real, $400,000 only goes so far on some of the major infrastructure projects that we have on our agenda. We're talking about projects in the millions and millions and millions of dollars on a regular basis, even as you look at the capital forecast. So, two things on that front. One, as I said earlier, it requires us to lobby the province and the feds in terms of how we continue to get more money to support us. But also, I think we need to reevaluate in terms of what level we should be at. And for example, I think I mentioned it was probably about 10 or more years ago, I asked Mr. Petherick, just for a quick analysis, if we were at the same rate as Wellesley, right, one of the smaller townships, almost between us and the cities, how many more dollars would we have in our bank, so to speak, to be able to invest in core infrastructure and services? And at that time, and we haven't done an analysis since, but it was around $2.5 to $3 million. As you can well imagine, $2.5 or $3 million in terms of surface treatment, gravel resurfacing, infrastructure rebuilds, et cetera, could go a long way. So it's something that we dabbled in with the last council in terms of, is it something that we're proud of? Is it a place that we want to continue to be? What is the result of being the lowest tax rate? Does that mean that we'll continue to be challenged in terms of what we actually have in the way of tax levy for investing on our infrastructure and facilities, et cetera? Anyways, all things that I think we should ponder as we get through the next 2 days in terms of looking at some of the background and context that I think we need to wrestle with.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, this is more directed at Interim Director Fairweather. What CAO Brenneman said there kind of resonated with me a bit. So I'm wondering if we can get some of that data. I know that we can't have it right now, but what would our projected increase be this year if we were to be equal to Wellesley in the amount that they tax their tax base? Could we get that data? Could we get it for Wilmot and North Dumfries as well, just so that we can at least compare? Because I think that might tell a story, if we want to be equal with a place like Wellesley and we have to raise our taxes 17% or, whatever that number is, it'd be interesting to see what that data actually tells us.
Okay, thank you. Is that something that you can do through the course of the day today?
I don't know whether I can get it all for the course of the day, but I will try, but I'll have it for the next budget meeting on Thursday.
Okay, super. Thank you. Councillor Schwint.
I think it's really important if we're putting that data together. It's great to look in aggregate. That's an extra $3-4 million for the township. I'd also like to see how much dollars is it per individual taxpayer, because if we're all of a sudden going up $500 in taxes versus $80, like also not significant cash flow on an individual basis. We can't just look in aggregate.
I think that's a good point. And one of the notes I made at the very beginning was that 1%, and I think I got it right, is $10.69 per household. So that sounds a little different than 1%. Councillor Grant.
I wanted to tack on to Councillor Cadeau's request of just historically, how long have we been the lowest tax rate? I think that would be a good perspective to have compared to the other municipalities. But I also wanted to ask Jared specifically about contracted services. And you mentioned in the report, it mentions kind of our inability to manage those those projects effectively, just with the number of contracted services we have and the staff that we have there been like resulting delays in completion or errors or fixes that have resulted because of that?
To your Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Grant, it's an interesting question. I would think that I guess what I want to sort of explain is that if you are looking to do work, whether it be operating or capital, and engage contract service, it is garbage in, garbage out in a sense. You need to put together a proper form of tender. You need to explain to the industry what you're looking to accomplish. So I think that is really important. That is time and energy. It's a fact. We like to think we do a decent job of it here. I think we understand contract law is important. It's important to understand that world. And that is more on the larger capital project piece. So that does take a lot of time and energy. A lot of our capital programs involve engineering services well up front, 2 to 3 years up front of construction. I can assure you that making changes in design is far cheaper than making changes under construction. In the operating side of things, there is so many we're fortunate, I guess I would say first off, is that we're fortunate by having a good group of local contractors. That's very helpful. You don't get that necessarily in the capital world. It's more out there. So I think what we do is try to leverage our local services as much as possible. That takes some burden off of staff, but we aren't doing as much as we should be doing. Just because we don't have the resources. And then, of course, as soon as you get into an issue in a contract service, that takes a lot of time and energy as well to untangle that, unpack that, figure out what's fair and reasonable. Where does the fault lie? Of course, the township has the money, so everybody looks to the township to pay. It's not always that simple. So that can take a lot of time and energy going through meetings and various courses of action that way. So in a roundabout way, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are definitely certain services that are far better to be contracted out, services that we're probably not getting to in some way, and other services are much better to take in-house and look after ourselves. But unfortunately, in the operations world, again, I rely on 2 supervisors and 1 manager for 350 odd kilometers of road. I forget how many, if it's almost 100 kilometers of water main or it's a lot of infrastructure. We got trees, and then you're dealing with customer concerns and complaints as well. So the picture is simple. It's fire to fire to fire to fire. There's not a lot of long-term planning available, not a lot of time to really dive into, hey, is it more beneficial to do this in contracted service or in-house service? I mean, a lot of that needs to happen, but it's not. So we are kind of unfortunately running around a little bit in that world, not always as efficient. But again, trying to do the fair and reasonable thing and respect the ratepayers of Wool, which is the best we can. I think that if I could use this opportunity as well, it shouldn't be lost on council that there was a number of reductions in the operating budget. And it's unfortunate. I mean, you see numbers coming off on street sweeping, tractor mowing. Some of this is reactive, right? So you don't know what it necessarily is going to be. But we have zero money for a sump pump program. That's $50,000 that we were looking to try to do this year originally, and we can't. We were only able to spend about 70,000 last year. And that was just to tackle one area. And I can assure council, there's many more areas that have impacted, sidewalks and roadways. And I think the sump pump program is an interesting one in that there's probably a dual role for both the township in certain cases to help support and look for an outlet where some residents may not have that. And this all goes back to how it was constructed. We go back to development. So, again, why it's incredibly important to have the appropriate staff and resources at the initial phase of turning a greenfield property into, a plan of subdivision, for example, is to try to ensure that we have infrastructure that is long-term, doesn't create these challenges. So a lot of this is going backwards, being incredibly reactive to some of these historical problems. And some of these customers are, unfortunately, they don't have an option. Some do, and that's a challenge too. You got to work through that option that some are on the homeowner, but some are requiring township support and help. And, this year we're not going to unfortunately have a program to do a lot there. And we're just going to have to to manage, and we share that risk and liability with some of those individuals. But that would be definitely a contracted service and a program that would be nice to be able to have a sustained funding level there that we can help residents, year over year as they come in, for example.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So you presented us with a program for 2024, and I could assume the answer, but I'm going to ask, because do you have enough staff to actually implement what you've proposed?
Yeah, it's a great question. Through Mayor Chance to Council. So this year, and I think I need to speak holistically about both operating and capital, and we'll get into that more on Thursday. That's a large capital program, largest in Township Woolwich history for infrastructure services, and I've said that the last 3 years running now. So that's an indication. So with a full complement, currently, everything that's before council is both must do and can be done. I think that's important to understand. Currently, we do not have a full complement, so we need to take that into consideration. We're hopeful that we can get a full complement. It is a very difficult workforce world right now, in looking to attract and retain good staff. I think that is not a Woolwich only problem, by the way. That is both municipal and private, but we are all competing for the same few that are out there. So that is a statement that needs to be on the record as well. But yes, certainly in the operating, as we can appreciate, there's a number of reactive accounts too. So that means that we may need for winter controls, an excellent example. We tried to right size that ship. We were unfortunately underfunding that for a number of years. About 2 or 3 years ago, we tried to move the needle to more appropriately reflect what we are doing. So you see that now, but you're at the whim of nature, right? So that can ebb and flow. A number of things contained in the operating budget are there as well. But yes, before you today in operating, this is something that's absolutely doable. We are down a wastewater operator currently right now that we've been having a hard time looking to replace, but we are able to manage and complete the operating budget that you see before you today.
Thank you. And this one's putting you on the spot, so sorry about that. But is there one project in particular, if you could add a project in, because presumably you've gone through and done some prioritizing, if you could add one project back in, what would it be, and what would the cost of that be approximately?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess the areas that I would see to be most important in the operating budget that we are would be the gravel road program would need to elevate for sure. I think we're all seeing it's probably a number of things really. I think there's an expectation has changed in the public world as well. Our gravel roads, we know we need to get around sooner. It's too long. Even at the 7-year mark is too long. So 3 years is the right number, and that comes at a significant cost increase. Probably double the budget, quite frankly, in the gravel program world to try to meet something like that. And that's just a guess right now. But I also I feel strongly that the sump pump program is it's an underfunded program this year, and I think that's really something that I know some of the area municipalities have. They put a pot of money together. They have a committee. People are able to come to the municipality, share a drainage concern or a drainage issue. It's vetted through a committee process, and then there's some money available. And it's first come, first serve, and when the money's out, it's done. I think that would be a nice goal, because I think there's so many unique situations with respect to drainage in the township. And not all of them are, they can, like I said before, can be dealt with individually. They do need some, municipal support at times, or, it's more of an area initiative as well. And it would be nice to have some of that. I think that's a good customer service piece as well. And there's a lot risk and liability to the municipality. So I think there's a win-win really to have a program such as that. But I think that would probably be my answer. If just to be put on the spot like that, yeah, that's where I would see important funding allocation.
Okay, and then if I can follow up with one more question to sort of connect the dots on those. We were with the recommended increase in the infrastructure reserve allocation. We'll be putting almost $2 million, excuse me, into the infrastructure reserve every year. So and I'm not sure if this is for you or Interim Director Fairweather, but is that money all spoken for? And sort of a question that goes along with that is, how are we using that infrastructure reserve to leverage some projects? Like perhaps the gravel one? And are there any grants available to work on those?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, through Mayor Shantz to council. So I think that reserve's a bit of a misnomer, because there really isn't a reserve. It's an in and an out, quite frankly, and that is really mostly between IS and RCS. And it is just, I will say, to keep the wheels on. So whatever's coming in, we are sucking out that year. There is no reserve being built up. I think in our operating reserve is very minuscule. I think in our water, wastewater, and there are really no reserves. And I think we can point to a number of reasons why. This is also something that needs attention from both at a staff level. So unfortunately, it is not, while it's incredibly important and it's needed, it really is not building up a bank. There is not reserve available. And I think that's what we're finding this budget year in particular. There is no reserves anywhere. We have been cut to the bone. We've been economized, so much so over the last, whatever that may be, number of years. But it's been and that's reflective. So all of those decisions had consequences, and here we are looking at what to do. So I think again, the important piece is having that vision and looking to move the needle forward to a sustainable Woolwich.
So the increase that we're proposing here, the 1.5% to the infrastructure reserve, then that's already used up in the budget that's presented here.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to Recreation and Community Services. And I'll call on Director Ann MacArthur. Actually, why don't we take a 10-minute break in case you need coffee or sugar? So we'll come back at about, excuse me, 10:30. All right, if I can call us back to order. And we'll turn the floor over to Director Ann MacArthur to present Recreation and Community Services.
Thank you. So today before us from Recreation, we have Marie Malcolm, who is the Manager of Recreation, and Thomas Vanderhoff, who is the Deputy Director. So Marie's focus area is primarily on programs and recreation and fitness, community development, events, day camps, and that kind of area is her expertise, and happy to answer questions along that road. And Thomas it certainly helps with facility management of all municipal facilities, oversight of the WMC and the St. Jacobs Arena, and outdoor facilitation of projects, and then facilitation of outdoor amenities, and the oversight of staff that look after those, such as trails and parks and playgrounds and things like that. So today the budget before you is really what we need in terms of capacity for resources and to continue to offer those programs and have staff in place to offer those programs, and at the same time have capacity, both staffing and resources, to look after our community assets, which sometimes are recreation assets, and many times they are municipally owned assets for the whole department. We will point out that we are fortunate in that some of our, we do have some revenue generation through our facilities, through rentals and through programs, leases in some of our facilities that help to offset our operating costs. These are the divisions that this department will look after. So cemeteries, general administration, Woolwich Memorial Center, the arena, parks, trails, recreation, the facilities and the associations associated with those, libraries, and other township facilities. So general administration captures items such as staff costs, departmental expenses for fleet and fuel, training, and the grant funding for the senior center. Some major operating increases are contained for the department in this division. Specifically, the loss of provincial COVID relief funding in the amount of $133,000 is captured here. And as Stephen mentioned earlier, the additional 1% climate action levy transfer to reserve in the amount of $143,000 is also captured in this division. One of the major projects out of this area will be the master plan. I think the last master plan this department did was maybe before Thomas was born, so 1977, 1987. So we're excited to have a document that will guide us in terms of where facilities and parks and trails will be needed in the next 15 years to service growth. Woolwich Memorial Center, as everyone's aware, this is oversight for areas such as aquatics, programs, fitness, ice rentals, and facility rentals. It's home to the City Senior Center and the Youth Hub. Most recreation staff work out of the site for the facilitation of all other operations such as parks, facilities management, cemeteries, and project management. Some of the major drivers in this department will include minimum wage increases around $75,000. This covers the dollar per hour for minimum wage would apply to aquatics, customer service, students, and facility staff. And as you'll note up there, we have about 115 part-time staff that this would affect. I would highlight that the carbon tax that's gone up, I think $15 per ton this year, seeing an increase of $21,000. So in 2024, we'll pay $131,000 in this tax, something that's a driver in this particular division. Some of the major programs that we wanted to talk about, certainly aquatics had the most successful year probably in 5 years. It would be the first year that this area has not only met or exceeded pre-pandemic levels. So Marie and her staff have done a wonderful job with recruitment of staff, new programs. So they're seeing numbers and people back to the facility that we haven't seen. And this will be our first full year that we'd be able to see what utilization rates were across the board, and they've been very successful. And their goal is just to continue to find revenue growth and ways to generate revenue in that facility. Parks is another really big focus area for us. We're responsible for management, inspection, repair, and maintenance of township parks, playgrounds, trails, sports fields, reading initiatives, and climate action events. You're looking to add another summer student to assist with looking after primarily gardening of all the sites that we have in the township. And one of the things we need to speak about today is new amenities, both through community funded projects that amenities that we receive, and then in terms of growth through parkland subdivision development and dedication to us and what that impacts. So this year, the second splash pad going in Breslau, I mean, that group's been waiting for 7 years and has done a really, fantastic job raising the capital component of that project. But with that comes some impacts to the operating. So $25,000 that we've noting as an impact to this division will cover costs for water consumption only and does not really reflect costs that will be absorbed for staffing, repair and maintenance, or any other aspects in terms of that. I don't know if you want to talk about.
Yeah, just briefly touching on the assumption of parkland through parkland dedication and the assumption of open space. A lot of the time, in addition to parkland, we will assume open space that's not land that's able to be developed. So whether that's woodlots or wetlands, that sort of thing, and that's something that this department needs to manage as well. In 2024, timing is always very difficult with regards to when we will be taking on parkland from developers because we're at the whim of timing and the building. So in 2024, we're anticipating taking on 4 additional parks in Breslau, St. Jacobs, and Elmira. And then, the next 5 years looks like at least a park or 2 a year in Breslau. And like Annie mentioned, we then need to capital plan for those parks because a lot of times we get those parks and residents move in and they're looking for amenities in those parks, and it's better for us to get in amenities earlier than later. So that's a challenge. That's a capital challenge though, and that can be spoken to on Thursday. And then we do have a lot of wonderful advocacy and fundraising efforts by groups in the community, such as the Breslau Splash Pad. Just to further what Annie said, I think the previous report to council specified an additional 40,000 in budget required for water and staffing. And then we've also realized as well too, and you'll note in the budget that we've looked to kind of bump up and ramp up customer service support at the Breslau Community Center as well too, because of how busy that center is, the revenue that we're generating there, the library moving into the basement, the splash pad moving right outside the park without a washroom facilities. So that park is just a huge draw for that neighborhood. Yeah, that's it.
And so just to kind of close that loop in that in terms, we're not advocating for additional full-time staff at this time, but really want to set the stage that, with 12 new parks and a number of kilometers of trails that have come on and washrooms that will come on, there will be a time where there'll be needed additional boots on the ground resources for trail maintenance, garbage pickup, grass cutting, those things. We continue to squeeze the capacity of existing staff out there at some point. The township and the number of parks that they have to meet in a day just isn't feasible. And we're setting the stage that, as we say, 4 new parks next year, 8 in the last several years, that will become a pressure point that we'll need to discuss future years. No?
Just to speak to that as well too, just for council, to paint the picture for council and recognizing that this isn't an ask that we have before you for 2024, but for future years. When the Woolwich Memorial Center was constructed and opened in 2009, we saw the addition of, I believe it was 4 or 5 staff in 2010 and then 2011, because truthfully, we really weren't equipped to kind of manage this new amenity, right? We didn't know what that was going to entail. And that was the last time that we've added full-time unionized complement to the department. So it's been a number of years. And I'm sure everyone's aware of just the development that we're seeing in Breslau and Elmira and St. Jacobs. So it's been a number of years since we've had additional boots on the ground added to the department.
Thank you. So just a couple of projects in 2024 I want to highlight is that climate action through our environmental coordinator will continue to have some community events out in the community. I think we did 10 or so last year and continue to add that. There are a number of park improvements and amenity improvements that will be discussed during Capital on Thursdays, but we want to highlight that there will be some amenity improvements coming forward. To speak to the recreation community associations, council is aware that we have assumed responsibilities for those community centers, and that is including rentals, staffing, programming, building, repair, and maintenance. The Breslau Community Center and Park continues, as Thomas spoke, to be very, very busy, and we had 600 rentals in that space in 2023. Which is just a huge increase over 5 years ago. At one point, we were trying to decide what to do with that facility, and it's really just come back to life. The facility and park will continue to see significant increases in usage, as Thomas noted, with the library opening in spring of this year, and then hopefully the splash pad in June. So we are seeking some additional part-time staff to help with program and events in Breslau. See $30,000. I wanted to point out that with 600 rentals, they almost doubled the revenue that they anticipated for 2023. There is no full-time staff oversight down there, so we want to make sure we have a little bit of supervision. It's a very busy center and a lot of responsibilities. So that's kind of the ask in that area. That's a really good news story for us. Again, it's been kind of troublesome what to do with some of those centers, and this one has been very successful, and Marie and Jen and the group have done a great job. And just to quickly touch again on libraries, we have 2 standalone libraries and 2 branches that are contained within municipal and or private facilities. You'll see a little bit of a kind of a design for the basement. I think they started construction, in the last couple weeks. There will be some additional operating costs and some lease revenue coming into this division in 2024. We are, in 2024, trying to finalize the cost-sharing agreement with the region. There's been some staff changes in that location, so we have not been able to facilitate and finish that process. It will have some minor impacts up or down on the budget, but nothing significant that can't be worked out.
Just on that note as well too, under libraries, council may have noticed that there isn't any costs, I believe, under the winter maintenance lines. Those have been eliminated, and that's due to this cost sharing agreement with the region. Come to terms with them on that's something that they're planning on taking off the township.
And I think that is the end of our presentation. So these 2 would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Thomas and Marie. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to Annie. We have a number of community centers in the villages around. Are they raising the funds to cover the costs of maintaining them, or are we finding their I'm going to say cost-sucking venture that we have right now?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. I would say that those groups are continuing to run events and to fundraise some money. They do help with some cost where feasible. Maybe if there's an upgrade to, I won't say the playground, but maybe tennis court or something like that, they are at times contributing to those. But for the most part, repair and maintenance is being absorbed and completed by the township.
So we're finding that they're not covering their costs, basically. They're draining resources, I guess, away from the township because we just don't have sufficient funds coming in to cover all of our costs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it would be a shift. So that at one time they were volunteering, they would collect the revenue and then pay for those expenses. So now that is shifted to the township. So if there are any rentals, we look after the facilitation of that. We retain the revenue and use that for building repair and maintenance. So it's a shift.
So, but basically, are we losing money on those, not making money, I guess is the simple way to put it?
I would say that in Wholesome, so Breslau certainly is an anomaly and is doing really well and is more than covering costs. Conestoga has really not had rentals until, or I guess when it had a daycare back maybe 5 years ago. Maryhill and Bloomingdale continue to have some rentals, but those do continue to dwindle, I would say, over the last 5 years.
Do we have a way of increasing the revenue on those buildings so they are not draining our funding away?
I think that's one of the goals for staff in 2024 is to look at other ways to repurpose those facilities. We've tried to do programming. It's not really been an uptake in those communities. we're trying to advocate different kinds of rentals in those facilities. And yeah, and that's something we have to have conversation about and come back to council with some ideas on how we may repurpose a couple of those facilities. Yeah, so they are generating and helping to offset costs. Conestoga, I think, is one we can speak to. As I mentioned, it was previously a daycare. It's been used by the township for the last 5 years, and I think our goal is to can look to do an RFP perhaps and see if there's someone who would like to rent that facility to help offset, and that would be our first kind of venture back into that field. And then if that is successful, maybe look at doing that in other facilities.
Thank you.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the director. Just wanted to clarify for Tweak here, the rural roadside planting, there's a note on page 199 that we'll be looking to Innova to get 50,000 in grant funding for the trees. Have we been successful in that? And what are the options if that's denied, just to make sure they have the money available?
I'll start, I guess. I just want to highlight that while that program is captured under our department and Tweak, our staff facilitate and help with Tweak, that really IAS has been a big supporter and help with making sure that program is successful. Is my understanding that the funding has been secured for 2024.
Okay, of the full 50. Yeah, okay, perfect. And just one more question, if I may, on that 1% climate action fund there, the increase. Do we have anything in mind this year for that aside from the new position? There will be a little left over from that, and if there's any plans currently.
To Mayor Shantz, Councilor Burgess. So this area probably falls more under the capital program. But just to kind of go into it very briefly, 2 areas. So we are going to have our feasibility study done by the end of February for our 4 major facilities: St. Jacobs Arena, Breslau Community Center, WMC, and St. Jacobs Fire Station. And that's going to outline the capital program that needs to be put in place over the next 10 years for us to reach net zero. And then we also have some funds allocated under capital to kind of get rid of some of the, or tackle some of the low hanging fruit, some of our buildings that have residential style HVAC equipment, swapping those over to heat pumps, that sort of thing. So I can say there's enough funding available to kind of tackle that low hanging fruit. But the larger facilities like the WMCs and the St. Jacobs, those are going to require significant capital dollars. So this reserve is building, and we're gonna have a better picture in the next month. We're gonna come back to council with our consultant on what dollars are actually required to come out of that reserve to reach our targets the council set.
Councillor Schwint.
Thanks. Quick question on WMC, the debenture. How many more years do we have to go on that one?
It's more than 10 years is my understanding. It might be 15.
15
Is that- is
more?
that 10?
I don't think it's.
It would have been a
We can find out and get back to you.
Yeah.
A long time. Okay. And a couple other quick questions on, we've got subsidized costs for minor hockey, which is a wonderful program we want to support. But we're in inflationary times. How long are we committed to the hourly rates or arrangement with them? It's taking into account the current inflation.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor. So we did complete a 4-year agreement with the nonprofit affiliated users for 4 years at 1.5%. So they are wonderful groups and they do great things and want to support their recovery. But we will have to look at those rates outside of that agreement. I think this is second of 4 years.
Okay.
Councillor Cadell.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Director MacArthur. I'm just looking at the climate action levy. It's sitting at about $336,000. What expenditures came out of that in the last year?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, Councillor Cadeau. So in 2023, there wasn't a great deal of capital spending that came out of that reserve. What that was really focused on was, I believe there was some contributed to the rural roadside tree planting project. We fund some green team initiatives out of that. We funded climate action events. So Ann Roberts is doing wonderful work with Sandra, monthly events. Some of that's funded out of there. And then another $20,000 for just additional tree planting that the department spent out of there. So a lot of operating items in 2023. And that's really because we've been waiting for completion of this study to give us some direction on what we should be doing. So I'm hopeful that after next month, we'll be able to hit the ground running. And we didn't get to all of our facilities with the study, but we think that there will be some duplication with St. Jacobs, Breslau, applying those to some other buildings as well too.
Councillor Schwint.
You mentioned the recreation master plan is underway. Does that planning process take into account infrastructure in surrounding municipalities or cities? I guess, put it out there, I'm thinking Breslau traditionally has been underserviced. I can see a request or a need for a Rankin Memorial Center type project, which is huge dollars. But do we look into what facilities are nearby in Cambridge or Kitchener and how they can get some synergies between them?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. So the master plan will have some thresholds and where they see new communities to be situated in the next 15 years. I believe that Thomas had some conversations previously with the adjacent municipalities, because there are facilities that are, 5 to 7 minutes from Breslau, and whether, some of those are dated as well. So there was just very preliminary conversation about, if we're going to do something 10 to 15 years, would we renew here and have a partnership? Would we renew in Breslau and have a partnership? Or we don't know what that will look like. But certainly there's some conversations, and I think the municipality is open to some kind of something.
I'd really like to encourage those conversations. I don't know if they'll bear fruit or not, but I think it's good policy to talk to our neighbors and work together.
It is something that we chatted with our consultants about, so they are aware. And it's actually, we did have previous discussions specifically with Breslau, with the previous director of Kitchener that's now just recently retired, but about their aquatic facility and rink that are just over the river there. So those were some discussions that had, and absolutely it's something that we'll do in the future. Make sure we're not, providing facilities that aren't really needed for that area. So.
Just to one further point to that, in terms of development charges, I also spoke with a consultant about that. So that we want to start collecting development charges for those facilities that might be used, but it could be a proportionate share. So if we decide to do a multi-pad facility with Kitchener, that would be proportionate, and that we would only collect that. So that's something we're mindful, both as part of the master plan and then in terms of developing the development charges background study.
So I think this is what you said, but so if in the fullness of time we came up with an agreement with Kitchener and it was on the other side of the river, we could still, presumably we would have to contribute to that in some way. So that would be part of that whole development charge formula.
Yeah, that is, correct. So basically the threshold might say, yes, for now, we do need a facility. So we'll start to work towards that. But, in 10 years from now, when we start to get into some kind of preliminary planning, then based on the split on what costs for operating and the cost for capital, that would be shared. Yeah.
Anyone else? David?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, to council, just wanted to add some additional context to, back up, the conversation around, discussions with neighboring municipalities. I don't know if council is aware, but the city of Waterloo originally approached the township of Woolwich when it was building Rim Park, and they were looking to build it on our side of the border, so to speak. And so we're looking at some sort of partnership. 2 comments, definitely world-class facility. But I think the township at the time, considering the Rim Park financing issue, was happy that it avoided that whole issue. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but certainly it ended up costing a lot more for the city of Waterloo. It doesn't diminish that it was a world-class facility. The only other context I wanted to mention was, I remember being part of discussions a number of years ago when the city of Waterloo was looking to redesign Bechtel Park and close up some of the facilities there. They were looking to talk, about potential partnerships, or, I remember our staff raising at that time to say, hey, why don't we look at the usage statistics around our various facilities? And before you start investing, maybe there's groups within Waterloo that say, for example, could be using Heidelberg on a more regular basis, things like that. So here's what I would say. I think those discussions have always happened, but what I look forward to is a future, to your point, that they're actually concrete. Like that, even though, so it's interesting we're talking about this subject, I feel, because in the context of the standing committee hearing last week on regional government reform, always looking on ways, so if we're to have a two-tier system, how can you best, most efficiently, effectively deliver on services, programs, or infrastructures by talking with your neighbors? And so, I think that's, increasingly important. And it's also increasingly important because I'll just jump into the fray on the other discussion about, when I first started here, all of our community centers were run by volunteers, right? But over time, slowly but surely, we've had to take over responsibility for those facilities. And, we still have an incredible volunteer base in Woolwich. I think that's still second to none. But I think, when the capital facilities program back around 2009, 2010 happened, I think certainly in the case of Breslau, the Breslau Rec Association thought, we can take this on, we can manage it, but it was too overwhelming to manage a brand new community center, gymnasium, all the services and programs, revenue, and all of that. And so that certainly wasn't a surprise considering the size and scope of the situation. But I think what has been a surprise over the years is in terms of something like building Heidelberg, and then within less than a year, the Rec Association wrapping up and turning things over to us. So I certainly support the discussions that, Anne's had with the senior management team around really, from a business case perspective, looking at what we have in the way of facilities and seeing, to Councillor Bryant's question, how can we revitalize, repurpose, maybe make business cases for using these facilities for alternative uses, and hence, generating appropriate revenue. That, I think, is an important discussion and an important project that we need to take on.
Okay. Anyone else? I don't think, well, I kind of have a question, I guess. You talked about the increase in the carbon tax. Are there any rebates that we get, or are there grants that you see coming down the pipe that can help us? I know some of our programs, we've always said pools, for example, are always going to be a drain on our resources. Splash pads will be the same. And while Councillor Bryant makes a good point about making good use of our facilities and how can we get more revenue from them, some of that is just, a perk that we give to our residents in a sense. Do you see any grants or anything out there that might help us?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily see grants in place to offset the carbon tax, right? Because I guess the intent behind that is to, push a transition to decarbonizing our facilities. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the grants come through the FCMs of the world to allow us to go through this feasibility study and then carry out some of the work. So following this study completion, that is going to allow us to apply for additional funding for capital projects to decarbonize facilities. So that's where we see. But it's $15 per ton a year increase. So for facilities like the WMC, it is a significant amount. $130,000, I think, annually is what we're spending just on that tax portion alone.
So when the report comes in, you don't need to answer this today, but when that report comes, will you show us sort of where we've made savings on that carbon tax and where we, because you're looking at how we get to net zero. So where we've come from and what we've done to date and where we're going, will that be part of that report?
So we could, we can look back at how far we've come. What the study did was kind of a snapshot right now. Put meters on a lot of our water usage and hydro and gas and that sort of thing, and it's going to make recommendations for capital upgrades. So St. Jacobs is a good example. There's kind of three paths to net zero, right? There's not just one path, and it's what's the upfront capital costs versus operating, and oftentimes it's a higher capital upfront to have lower operating, or there's just kind of plug and play equipment that you can put in that maybe has higher operating costs down the road. So there's some options that we'll present to council at that time. 2021 and 2022 also throw a wrench into things when you're trying to look at what the last 5 years has looked like. So, but yeah, that's something we can look at. We're constantly looking at our utility figures on a monthly basis, really, and reporting through SWR and that sort of thing. So trying to keep a close eye on it and find anomalies and where we can improve, that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's most important to look forward and how we're going to get to our end goal. So I wouldn't say spend a whole lot of time on it, but it is also, it can be good, maybe it's bad, depending what the answer is, to see, how we've done in working towards that.
I just wanted to add one point to that, and we'll bring it back to council when we bring the feasibility study back, but we can look at hydro costs, and we were looking at, so not natural gas, but hydro from rates at 2018 to now has just been a substantial decrease. A really, really marked improvement. So changing out the plant and doing all new LED equipment and new dehumidification projects. Council will see, those aren't reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but they have really reduced the hydro consumption. So we can see just really clearly how advantageous those projects were to, reducing those utility costs over the last 7 years.
Okay, thanks.
Just one additional note. It's interesting too how everything is shifting so quick, right? And decisions that were made, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago to, go to an on-demand hot water heater or install, the CHP at the WMC or other things, At the time, some of those decisions may have been made with costing and cost savings in mind. And now we're not installing natural gas on-demand hot water heaters. We're installing heat pump hot water heaters, right? The technology is evolving so quick. Previous decisions from councils of priorities are changing, that sort of thing. So it's a very rapid pace, and we're seeing even at the capital level there is not there. The answers aren't all there for some of our larger buildings like the WMCs of the world. Because the equipment's not there, the technology is not there for some of those buildings. So yeah, just an additional note.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. David?
Yeah, I just thought, Anne touched upon this in her presentation, Madam Mayor, but, and we've been talking a lot about the bricks and mortar in the facilities, but she talked about one of the areas of success as we become a growing, thriving municipality is in the area of programming. And I thought, maybe it would be good for council also maybe to hear from Marie in terms of, what are we seeing in terms of the trends as we become this growing, thriving municipality for council's benefit? And what are we seeing in terms of level of increases and the realities and in terms of the services and programs that we need to offer too?
Through Mayor Shawns to council. So yes, we've been experiencing a great success this year with aquatics, especially just with our new programming. We're finding that residents are becoming more engaged into program offerings, but also tailoring our programs, focusing on what the needs are within the community. Especially for one base of our new program we implemented this year called Transition Tots. So focusing on that gap year of transitioning from a parent to a non-parent swim program. We initiated that program noticing there was a gap and a struggle with going through COVID and separating from a parent. that program specifically increased our avenue of program offering and success. Especially our pool rentals have been increasing as well. We have affiliated swim groups as well as outside organizations that is utilizing our pool. So that has also provided us a great avenue for revenue generation, but also serving our community members involved in those programming aspects. Summer camp is also a huge success for us as well. We increased our offering this past year, adding St. Jacobs as another camp location. That not only serviced our community members, providing ample opportunity for parents to enroll their child into programming, but also opening up other avenues of facilities to build awareness of what other programming happens in those specific communities. Rentals have been also an increase just over across the board, especially Anne mentioned about Breslau, but also at the WMC with our community center room space, as well as our usage of our floor when the ice is removed. This has increased with community events as well as just general programming. And we can project that will be a continuous increase as the years progress.
Thank you, Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, excuse me, that just kind of triggered a question for me. It's great to hear that, rentals and pool use is up, but what about the ice? Are we fully allocating our ice rentals? Are we ensuring that we're trying to fill that? Because I know it costs a lot of money to keep that ice in. Is it fully allocated throughout the hours that these facilities are open and operating? And if not, how can we really try to increase those off-peak hours?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Cadeau. Yes, so every year we have an ice allocation agreement that goes in with taking into account our building and facility operating hours. This allocation is based on agreements that we have with our affiliated sport users, and then goes on to adding on to our outside organizations, so adult user groups, as well as rentals that might be within the township, but also without. At this point, we are utilizing the ice to pretty much full capacity of our building hours and operating hours, taking into account the operation costs regarding staffing and facility and maintenance. Areas of growth could be more daytime usage. That is definitely an area that staff are exploring to see how we can utilize that area.
One follow-up question. Do you feel is it 3 ice surfaces that we have indoors in Woolwich? Is that sufficient to meet the needs of the community as it sits right now?
Through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Cadeau. At this point, yes. However, there is going to be continuous growth as our population does grow. We are going to see a substantial increase in minor user groups, as well as our affiliated groups such as Woolwich Sunrays and Woolwich Thrashers. There is an increase in their enrollment. So we'll notice that their allocation of ice, that agreement will have to be reviewed in policy, and we may see an influx of more ice needing to be available.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you very much. And finally, for this morning, I'll call on Development Services and Director of Development Services, Deanne Priest. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So we're here from Development Services. My name is Deanne Freese, Director of Development Services, and with me I have Lori Fox, who is the Manager of the Development Engineering Division, Nick Racanelli, who is the Chief Building Official, and Jeremy Bink, who is the Manager of Planning Services. So 3 divisions in the Development Services Department include the planning, as I said, the planning services, the building, and the development engineering. Planning is responsible for coordinating the development and growth within the township, and also processing and reviewing those individual development applications. Building is responsible for the review of building permit applications and also the inspection of any new construction. And development engineering is responsible for reviewing and overseeing those new developments from individual applications as well as larger subdivisions, and the review and inspection of that new infrastructure that goes along with those larger developments. I'm just going to go through a few highlights from each of the divisions, and then we have Jeremy, Nick, and Lori here to answer any specific questions for those divisions. The first is the Planning Services Division. So we have some reductions in the division to try to get down to a lower percentage. One of those reduction areas was the official plan and zoning bylaw review. So as council knows, both of these projects we are undertaking right now, currently in the process with both of them. So that's been reduced by 25,000. We are expecting slightly lower revenue to reflect the absorption of the agricultural enforcement costs, which again, council is aware of. The Breslaw secondary plan, there's an addition of $50,000, and that's to cover any of those additions we're going to need through the secondary plan process where we don't have expertise on staff, that we might have to contract out some services. So some things that might be a little bit more specific, like heritage or environmental or something that we don't have that expertise. We had added in a heritage study, but that has been removed. So that's a reduction of that 50,000. We are expecting some fees and charges increase due to the new fees and charges bylaw. Under miscellaneous, you'll see we have the year 4 of our termite program, so that's $60,000 there. And we have reduced the budget by 25,000 for GIS. Some highlights under the Building Services Division. This division is self-funded, so there's no impact on the tax base. We are, again, proposing one hybrid vehicle for $50,000 from the Building Reserve. So the Building Reserve currently sits at approximately 1.4 million. So we're looking at this new hybrid vehicle to help meet the township sustainability goals, and also for transparency, accountability, and also help with our recruitment process for new building officials. There is some fees and charges increase that were approved through the fees and charges bylaw, including some ability to collect for some areas that we did not previously have the ability to collect, like additional inspections. Moving on to the Development Engineering Division, we are proposing one new staff position, a Development Engineering Technologist position. This position would assist with the development review and particularly the servicing within the township to look at an overall broader understanding of the servicing and how we can service all the new development. We're expecting a lot of development, a lot of growth within the next few years, and with to 2050, expecting 50,000 people in the township. So there's a lot of growth, and a lot of that needs some coordination. Development engineering, this position will be self-funded as well. So we do collect enough fees to fund this position. So again, no impact on the tax base, but it will be funded through the growth and the development application fees that come along with that growth. Also proposing a summer student, again, same to deal with the growth that we're expecting, and that would be an additional 11,200 added to the budget. We are expecting a very significant increase in projected fees that will be collected in 2024. This is due to the anticipated development applications that we have, but it's also to realize the changes in the way that we calculated fees that were actually implemented in 2022, but we're now expecting to realize them in 2024. We changed the way that we calculated the development engineering review fee, so it's now a percentage of the overall development rather than a flat fee, and it more accurately reflects the time spent or the time needed to be spent on the review of development applications. And lastly, after the initiation of our site alteration bylaw, we have adjusted our legal budget to accommodate appeals to that site alteration bylaw and specific application appeals. And that's it for my presentation. And like I said, we have the three managers here to answer any questions as well.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you to Deanne. I'm just looking at the planning operations budget and I noticed that the actual versus the forecasted budget is quite different. I'm not sure what the 2021 and the 2022 forecasted budget was, but when we look at 2023, it was 1.3 million and then the actual is actually 852,000. I'm just wondering, are we like, can you just kind of explain why there's that large difference between kind of forecasted costs as well as like the actual? Not, I mean,
Here.
For the mayor to Councillor Grant. So we don't have all the numbers in yet from the end of 2023. So the official plan did provide us some additional costs at the end of the year, which will be still have to be accounted for. The agricultural enforcement is totally not captured yet. That's another, they'll be at max. So we'll be paying out the full 106,000 by the end of 2023's term. So there are a few items that are bigger ticket items that you're not seeing yet because they're submitted in the end of December. So there's going to be some numbers there. We did end up being slightly under budget with the active transportation and a few other areas we were slightly under budget as a result. So that did help. If you do look at the the legal contracts, et cetera, you'll note we didn't spend as much money there because we had anticipated Mad West. We were hoping Mad West was going to get approved earlier in 2023, and then we would have needed some legal funds in that area to move forward with the expropriation. So we didn't end up doing that because Mad West wasn't done till December. So we had to shift the expropriation to start this year in 2024. So you're going to see some numbers that we had anticipated and didn't come to fruition. And we had also hoped we thought we might be spending more on the OP zoning with the Breslau secondary plan and the zoning bylaw work that we're doing. But the zoning bylaw work's getting dragged into 2024 just because of some of the projects. So a little bit of shifting of funding just because of where projects went and some of our change of focus in 2024 and trying to budget balance things and just move numbers as a result.
Thank you.
I'll let Councillor Burgess go first and then Councillor Schwint.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz. Just touching on the new position, what would be the detriment to the township if we did not approve that? And why are you asking for it now versus last year or the year before? Like what's kind of the threshold now that you're requesting it?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, and Lori can speak to this as well, but this position is really needed to manage the workload that we're expecting from new development applications. We already have staff that are working extra hours to try to accommodate the current development review process. And just to try to get that done in timelines, we do have those legislated timelines for planning applications. So if we don't get them processed in time, we would have to issue refunds. So we'd actually end up losing money by not having a position available and being able to process those applications within that time frame. So it's the amount of work that has warranted this position. Is there a threshold? I don't know if that's an easy one to answer. I think right now, based on the amount of work that we have and the what we're expecting for fees that are coming in and applications that are coming in, we feel that it's an appropriate time that we would be able to have a full workload without overworking that position or underworking that position. But I'll let Lori weigh in as well.
Thanks, Deanne. Through the mayor to the councillor. Yeah, Deanne touched on most of the points. Really, it is about the anticipated development and these are developments that are either draft approved or they're in the process that we know are going to be going forward. And we just don't have the staff resources in place to properly review the applications in-house. So we would have to send them out to be reviewed, which is an option, but it's an expensive option. And it takes a lot more time. It would really be a hit to the timelines, which then, of course, as Deanne mentioned, negatively affects our bottom line anyway. So it's a very cost effective solution is just to add the staff complement.
So are we sending some out right now to be approved?
To the mayor, to you. We do send out technical reports to review things that are above our technical expertise of the staff that we have. So that would be the other thing. We're looking for, this new position would have some level of technical expertise that we're missing in our staff complement right now, which would mean some of that stuff wouldn't have to be sent out as well. Again, cost savings, but mostly time savings to getting this stuff reviewed and approved very quickly.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarity, so I'm on the same page, those timelines you're talking about, like some new timelines came down from the provincial government, which I know affected Mr. Vink quite a bit. Are you guys working hand in hand and have the same kind of timelines then through that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So development engineering are responsible for reviewing all of those development application as well. So they are responsible to meet those same timelines as well.
Okay, and lastly, if I may, just on the summer student, not that I'm really discouraging hiring one of them, but how do you find building those were for, do you still find there's a lot of inspections going on? Like I know the government's raising rates and trying to cut back on inflation, which should cut back on projects. Like we're not talking new development per se, but like just inspections in the township and that. Are you seeing a decrease in that? And will we still need that summer student?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so this summer student would assist in inspections for new development
Okay.
applications. So they it kind of feeds down, right? More development applications result in more inspections. And particularly the summer student is most valuable because that's when the most of the inspections can occur for new asphalt, new landscaping, all those things that are part of those new subdivisions.
Thank you.
Mr. Poupey, did you want to weigh in on the previous discussion there?
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. I think it's important for council to understand the interconnect between both the Development Services Department and the Infrastructure Services Department. So from a cradle to grave process, Development Services gets it at the ground level. And the challenges are if Development Services isn't resourced properly, that has a significant impact and huge cost implications on the Infrastructure Services, which is looking after the maintenance and ultimate replacement. So what we have found is it's all about getting good development. I think that's the critical piece. And good development is you get what you inspect, not what you expect. So while we expect good development, you need to have boots on the ground and you need to have the resources available. So the ask that's before council, while it's being funneled through Development Services, has a great advantage to Infrastructure Service. I can share that my own personal time is being used on the Development Services side of things from a servicing perspective, which we look to this position could help alleviate that. And again, it's just because we are all trying to pick up the pieces and do the best we can for the organization. So I think that's a challenge. So I appreciate that while it's a Development Services ask, Infrastructure Services is really hoping that this would move forward because it does have a significant impact and reduces and allows us to focus more appropriately on some of our day-to-day. So we are being stretched in different areas because of the lack of resourcing in Development Services. So I just wanted to paint that picture for council, is that there is a significant cohesion here, and this ask does help engineering and as a whole and Infrastructure Services.
Thank you for that perspective. It is important to, be more than one look at things more than 1 year at a time and potential cost saving down the road. I've got Councillor Schwint, Councillor Cadeau, and then Councillor Grant. Deanne, did you want to add to that?
Sorry, I just did want to comment again to Councillor Burgess. He had asked about, is that that's threshold. So our expected population forecast is the highest in the region. We're expecting basically a 47% change between now and 2051. So I fully expect that over the next few years, we'll be coming back again because we need to accommodate all this growth that is projected in the region. We have a very large area of land in Breslau, but even without that, we've got a lot of growth just expected in this area through intensification as well.
Councillor Schwint.
Thanks. I think we've touched on it before, but we've had fluctuations in provincial policy the last year, and we don't know what the results will be from our proposal in December. How will the results impact your business plan and needs in 2024? Either way, if it accepts our recommendation or if they make another left turn?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and Jeremy can comment as well if he has additional information to add. But the population projections are based on what population is expected to come to the township regardless of whether or not we add that land. So whether or not we have more accommodation of this population through redevelopment and intensification, or we have it through greenfield development, either way, we are expecting a large amount of development. So whether that land is added or not, we're still expecting that growth. It's just the form that that growth takes, and how quickly it comes on board as well. So we do have lands also in St. Jacobs and Elmira that will develop, as well as intensification. That Breslau area really is a long-term planning as well. So a lot of the lands that we are expecting to develop within the next 5 years are already there. They're already in that plan. We're already expecting applications. We know what's coming forward. So this position that we're requesting now through development engineering is based on what we're expecting to come in now, regardless of whether or not that land is added.
Just follow up, will our role in those applications change depending on which way the province rules? Are they strictly talking about parcel land itself? And
Sorry.
will our oversight role change depending on which way the province rules?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So if you're referring to specifically Bill 23 and the delegation of planning responsibilities, yes, our role would change. It could result in some additional staffing needs if we were given that full planning responsibility. We have been working with the region and the other municipalities to figure out what the implications would be of that full transfer of responsibilities. We would have additional responsibilities if Bill 23 goes through and we get full responsibilities for planning. And our role, well, council's role would change in being the approval authority, and then our role would change in a little bit more of that back end planning approval responsibility.
Okay, and finally, this is the sales and marketing part of me coming out, but we've got building enforcement as the department. Is enforcement the right term in what the department's actually doing, or is it oversight of requirements and permitting, that type of thing? I don't understand the department as well as I should, obviously.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the building department is responsible for permitting and inspection of new construction. So not like by law enforcement, but they do enforce the Building Code Act and the Building Code. I'm getting those right.
Thank you. Since we were talking about the Bill 23, just for clarity and how I see things moving forward. And it would have to be, I know we'd have some discussion and some work to do, but if the urban boundary does expand, I don't see our growth necessarily expanding. Past maybe even the current urban boundary, but I see us having the ability to create a plan that makes sense within that urban boundary. So just for clarity for anyone who's listening or for everyone in the room, I certainly don't see us expanding out to the urban boundary, and I don't see us going to a less dense sort of development. So just to make that point at this juncture. Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. It's a really brief question. I think I know the answer. I just want to confirm if this new position is going to be fully contained within Development Services budget.
Yes, that's correct. We expect that would be able to be fully funded through the increase in the fees that we're expecting.
Okay, and should we not move forward with this and have to start issuing refunds, where is that money going to have to come from?
That would have to come from our fees and charges that we collect. If we had to issue a refund, it would come out of that same budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grant.
So this is, I kind of want to touch base. Last year, there was a lot of speculation about how the timeline that the province brought down for review would affect staff. I'm just wondering if you can kind of illuminate how that has rolled out and as a reality over the past year, just so we can have a perspective of kind of what's changed and did speculation meet reality?
Yeah, so again, through Madam Mayor, and I'll let Jeremy weigh in on this as well. So we, I think, very effectively dealt with the new timelines and in creating a new process for how we can get applications approved. And the way that we did that was through those holding provisions. So what the result of that is yes, we can get applications through the system in the time frame and not have to issue refunds. But the implications are it's additional amount of work and it's additional cost. So it's a cost for the applicants having to now submit for a holding removal. It's a different additional work for us and having to process another report and continue to work on the application, come back to council or get delegated to myself as the director to approve those holdings. But it creates another process. So I don't know if that's totally answering your question, but yes, we're able to do it within the time frame, but it does result in more work for us.
Just further to that, we did implement it. Our process has been very effective. It doesn't come with growing pains, so it has been a challenge that to keep staff like literally moving. It is hard because you got to push other things aside to work on those files to keep them moving. And as Deanne mentioned, the holding provisions are being implemented, and some people are not understanding why we're putting on holding provisions and making them go through another process, unfortunately. But that's the unfortunate reality because we have to process them with that timeline. Either we refuse them because the application is not complete, or we put the holding in to give us time to deal with some minor technical issues and lift that holding after. People are just not understanding that process and that additional cost, and that's unfortunate, but there's not much we can do without starting to hit those refunds. It is, and we've had some growing pains on the site plan side too. So what's complete and how we deal with that and how we get them to enter into applicate agreements with us. So a bit of growing pains, but we have been basically hitting our targets within those timelines. And as noted, it has pushed a lot of work onto development engineering to try to keep up with us. And it has been a bit of a challenge on their end too. We know it's tough timelines when you're working with 30 days to review and get your comms out to say, are we in a good position to pass this or not?
Councillor Cadeau and then Councillor Burgess.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you, with the provincial fluctuations, we had been promised some form of recuperation for the time that we spent on some of these files. I'm just wondering if we have any update on to the status of that.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So my understanding is if they roll back the changes, then we could submit for costs for the work that we did during that time. So if we are in that position and they do continue with rolling back, then my understanding is that we can submit for the costs of the time that we spent to do this Breslau secondary plan. But we're still in a waiting period.
Councillor Burgess.
Thanks, through you, Mayor Shantz, the director. Just want to touch on the AmeriCorps revitalization plan, if I may. I know you guys touched on that a bit. Can you just expand a bit more? For 2024, you gave us this spreadsheet here about the acquisition of sale and purchases. Just what that's looking like. Is there going to be expropriation or people, how's it playing out, I guess is what I'm saying in general.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, and I understand that it is vague in the way that it's worded, and it's worded vaguely on purpose because of specific properties that we are looking at acquiring to implement the plan. So I'm not sure how much I can say in open session because I can't give you addresses, but the plan is to acquire some properties and potentially sell them back in different forms. So some of the land we might need, some of the land we don't need, some of the land we own, and then that would be debentured for a 2-year period. Then we'd be able to sell those lands back through a request for proposals. We can get the type of development that would implement the plan.
We can have a more open conversation in closed, if you'd like. I don't have anyone else on the list. Councillor Bryant, did you have anything? No. Okay. David.
I did just want to note, based on some of the questioning around, our discussions last year at budget and discussions around bringing on additional staff pending, what was happening with the province. And you know, the new timelines, what was happening with Bill 23. You know, but what I can tell you is that because of all the provincial fluctuations last year, it was good that council supported, you know, the need for additional staffing last year in particular, because in the end, we ended up having to pivot on a whole bunch of different areas, including, for example, there was one request that came out from the minister through the mayor's office to say, hey, remember that report we sent out around the top priorities and areas of focus regarding affordable housing? What would be your top 5, right? And again, last year was not just the year of fluctuations, it was the years of unusual requests with very short timelines in which to respond to the province. They continued to look for feedback from the mayors, the local area municipalities. And, you know, as I said, while one could say, you know, did the original vision in terms of the need for staffing exactly materialize in the absence of Bill 23? No. But what did materialize because of all the provincial fluctuations was a lot of considerable extra work that wasn't anticipated. And I think it would have been difficult to stay on top of the timelines that we needed to reach, and plus the extra work that we needed to do to respond to the province's various requests throughout the year. So I think, you know, that's just a reality of again, making sure that we're always properly resourced, not just to deal with the day-to-day, but it's the unknowns that come up from senior levels of government, sometimes opportunities that come up that we need to respond to as well. For example, I talked earlier about the fact that, you know, we're now in areas that we wouldn't have traditionally even responded to. The federal government came out with the half funding applications. And, you know, years ago, we would have just said, region, you do housing, you do that. But I know Deanne and her team spent a lot of time putting in and knock on wood, hopefully, you know, very shortly, hopefully we'll hear some good news, like happening at some of our cities with respect to half funding announcements, you know, again, to help us manage growth, i.e. in this case from a federal. Yeah, the Housing Accelerator Fund. Sorry, thank you for everyone's benefit. Half refers to the Housing Accelerator Fund. You know, on top of that Housing Accelerator Fund, there also has been numerous meetings with the, I'll call them Build Now Waterloo Region Group, who are a number of developers working with Habitat for Humanity locally in terms of trying to bring on 10,000 homes and finding opportunities for land. So the moral of the story is there's been a lot of pivoting that has had to happen this year because of changing priorities and fluctuations as well. And I just wanted to provide that context because, you know, last year was a very challenging year because of a lot of that pivoting.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of our morning agenda. Unless anyone, I guess before we we take a break and move to recess, are there any other questions from this morning that anyone has thought about and said, I wish I would have asked that? We do have 10 or 15 minutes if no? Okay. Very good. Then we're going to move, we're going to have a recess and we're going to move into closed at 1 o'clock and then hopefully come back out to the public at 1:30. But to do that, let's start with a resolution to move into closed so we don't have to come back and do that later. So a motion that the Council of the Township of Woolwich convenes in closed session on Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024 at 1 p.m. in accordance with Section 239 of the Municipal Act for the purposes of considering the following. A, the security of property of the municipality or local board, that would be cybersecurity. And B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and that would be a personnel matter. Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So we will recess until 1 o'clock. I would, oh, yeah. Jeff?
Just trying to find my camera button, sorry. We're about 20 minutes early. We could do that if you want, or if council wants, sorry. I would ask then that we just change the resolution that we passed to meet in closed session a little bit earlier. Maybe something like 12:45 if council wants to do that.
Yes. Do we have to actually vote on that, or you saw nodding of heads?
It would actually be nice to have that on the floor, Mayor Shantz, just because it's moving into closed session.
Okay, we'll look for an amendment to change that recess till 12:45. Councillor Grant and Councillor Burgess, I think you seconded it before. Yeah, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so we will see you back here for closed at 12:45. And assuming we get through everything in good time, we'll start back at 1:15 in public then. Okay. Thank you.
No.